I had a huge pain point. And that was a big motivation for me to save my money. My paycheck would come in twice a month. I would pay my expenses, pay my credit card bills. Every month it would go up 6,000, then go down 2,000, then go up 8,000, then go down 3,000. Steadily, it would be going up. So I know the life energy that it takes to save $20,000, $100,000. A lot of it is just time. And that's how this game is. It's not the get rich quick scheme, but if you can save your money and then also compound it and pay a lot less in taxes, that's how you get there a lot quicker. All right, welcome. First module of the Masterclass. My name is Lane Kawaoka. I will be doing an introduction of kind of my origin story, and which I think resonates with a lot of our clients, people who are stuck at their high-paying job. Most times an annual income of $100,000 is where I started in my 20s. And we had some folks that are multiple six-figure incomes, and also some business owners out there that have pretty high incomes too. Obviously, the goal is to prudently build their wealth the same way that I've learned that the wealthy do. And of course, money's not everything, but it does give you a lot of freedom to do what you want, where you want, with whom you want, and at least get you off living paycheck to paycheck, even though some of your folks' paychecks are rather large. Legal notice and disclaimer here. Of course, this presentation does not constitute the rendering of legal advice or services. The information is intended for informational use only and is not a substitute for legal advice. If you guys are looking for referrals, as always, reach out to team@wealthelevator.com and we can connect you with the folks that we recommend and found out there. But of course, state, national, and international laws vary, as do individual circumstances. As always, consult a qualified attorney on all legal matters. So just a little snapshot on myself and our company. I'm the owner and lead syndicator of the Hui Deal Pipeline Club, starting in 2016, investing alongside investors like yourself. We also have the paid family office Ohana Mastermind. Right now, over 100 members in that we started that around 2008. So that's our inner circle. So if you guys are looking for a mastermind of purely passive accredited investors to crowdsource deals, but mostly I built it as a place for myself and you to build lifelong friendships and relationships that ideally go generations deep. So we recommend that folks bring their adult children along. That way they can build relationships within the group. And oh, by the way, learn the same financial skills and build a peer network there. That said, you don't need to join that group to invest alongside of us in the Deal Club, which at this point, we've acquired $2.1 billion of real estate and well over 900 live investors who've invested at least $50,000 with us. So we are probably one of the biggest investor groups out there for retail type of investors like us. And that's what I always say. When you work with any sponsor, syndicator, all the words mean the same thing. Really trying to figure out what's their experience in terms of numbers of dollars. People like to throw around 100, 200, $300 million, which is not very much. Around 2020, we went over that $1 billion mark. And I felt like that was the point that we really started to hit our stride. Obviously, a lot of lessons learned throughout the years. We've worked with a lot of people. We've stopped working with some of those. And I think what really sets us apart is not only of our network of passive investors out there, but our network of partners on the GP level and the operator world. It really gives us insight in what's happening out there, who are the players, and what are ultimately allowing us to do that due diligence on people and deals. From these investors that have entrusted us with their money, count right now is around $200 million plus of equity within the group, 10,000 units plus, most of which apartment buildings. Obviously, we're going to be going into different types of projects in the future to not just be a real estate organization. So you're going to start to see, obviously, the projects start to go up I do believe we're probably around 65, 70 projects at this point. We just pushed out a big distribution last week where a few $1 million went out to LPs. So that puts the total LP distributions amount at $48 million out to passive investors, which we hopefully you can be part of that in the future. And of course, spanning many states out there. My professional background before getting into this, I got a bachelor's of science from the University of Washington in industrial engineering. I later went back and got a master's in civil engineering with the emphasis in construction management, and also got my professional engineering license. That's the PE. In 2007, I graduated college, started to work for BNSF Throwaway. At the time, Warren Buffett hadn't bought us quite yet, but it was a Fortune 50 company at the time. I didn't really care for the job. One of the issues was I was supervisor of a union workforce crew, traveling 100% of the time. I guess it was a good job for a guy in his 20s with no family. I was able to save pretty much my entire paycheck for a few years there, because I'll get into my story here a little bit. But later on, 2013 to 2015 and beyond, got out of the field to some extent and into the office managing large construction projects as the owner's rep for the railroad. One of my big projects out there is in Kalama, Washington, which is that new third rail out there, which got completed around 2016. But that was me, my first probably 5 years working. These are just a few of the guys from the crew. I didn't really use my engineering knowledge, but I think this is really where I cut my teeth in terms of leadership. And I always remember these times, but at the time, I didn't really like freezing my butt out there in the cold and traveling all over, working on the road, all day, long hours, working on the railroad. My professional career continued. At this point, the first job I had was working for a private company. And as we all know, private companies have not the best quality of life, but you do get paid a lot. And looking back, I think I did it the right way. I needed money to start my investing. And because I didn't really start off with too much. Now, obviously, I'm not a rags to riches story. I went to college. I, started with just a little bit of student debt, but overall, I'm not complaining. I was given a lot and I am grateful for that. But make no mistake, I grew my net worth from nothing to where it's at today with these strategies that I'm going to be sharing. But as I started to grow my real estate portfolio, the private job was just a little bit too much. I think a lot of us are in this world where, yeah, we could probably get paid another 10, 20% by working a lot harder. But at some point, it doesn't make sense when you have other sources of income. So in 2015, that was certainly the case for me. I moved from my private sector job to public. So I started to work for the government. My first stop was city of Kirkland as a city engineer, working with a lot of public works projects, things I've never worked before, but it's actually a lot of things that really help us in our development projects today. Did a lot of sidewalk jobs, drainage jobs, those little buttons that you press to go across the street. And these things drive me crazy. In my opinion, they're rather unsafe because they give pedestrians the false sense of safety and they just walk out in traffic. I would put those things together. Later on, moved back home to Hawaii in 2017 to 19, worked for the Department of Transportation for the state, where I was the pavement engineer for the Honolulu airport. I know a lot of you folks go to Maui. There's an Alpha Charlie project. There was a huge depression in that one runway where you make the left turn to go back onto the runway there. That was one of my projects in the short time I was there. And I also had a short stay with the federal side of the government. So I did it all. I did like private, state government, city government, and federal government. Didn't spend very long at the end there. But at that point, I pulled the plug and went full time into real estate, mostly because we started to syndicate deals. I started to take in investor money at that time. And for a little while there, maybe a couple of years, I just was a little bit irresponsible, I think, for me at the time to be doing a full-time job, even though I wasn't doing very much at the job and what it's grown today. But that was the professional side. I think what we're all more interested in is what my side job and how that grew. Obviously, I grew up in Hawaii and I moved to Seattle in 2003 when I went to University of Washington, graduated in 2007. So 2007, I started to save my money to buy a house to live in because that's what we were all brainwashed to do, to get on that escalator wealth building, which is buying your own home. I very quickly, in a couple of years, saved up $80,000 to go buy my first home to live in. It was about $350,000 in North Seattle. I didn't know at the time, but it was an A-class rental, higher end, A-class location, primary market, all the things that you're not supposed to do that we'll get into. But again, this was just a home for me to live in. And if you recall from my professional career, I started to travel on the road all the time and never home. And I was like, this is a little silly because I was just home on like literally Saturday. And then I had to hit the road. Sometimes even if I had to go to Montana where I had to go through Denver, I would have to leave home on Sunday morning to get there. So I was like never home. And it was silly for me to have this big house to myself. So I called up an old landlord from college. I didn't know that she was a property manager. And I said, hey, can you help me rent my place out? And that was the start of all this madness. I didn't know anything at the time. They didn't know about the 50% rule. I didn't know how much property managers charge. I just did it. And essentially, I went homeless. So I can recall the day where I was working in Whitefish, Montana, and the property manager said, hey, we got somebody to lease up your property. Can you come and get all your stuff out? And I drove all the way back. I think it took 9 hours. And I just had a big garage sale, Craigslist, everything. It was a little crazy. And I put everything I couldn't sell in a storage unit for the next, I think, 5, 6+ years. But at that point, I didn't have any housing expenses. So I think people look at like my genesis over the years just as an investor. There were a handful of years there that I was putting like 100 grand into rental properties and just pure savings. At the end of the day, this is as much as like a personal finance exercise of how much money do you save? And this is where if you get into the coaching calls, we have a lot of free ones on the website at thewealthelevator.com/coaching. I always ask people, what is your net savings? I don't care what you make. So many people have phenomenal salaries, 400,000, $500,000, $1 million a year, but it all matters what your net is. For most of our clients out there, you guys are saving at the very least $50,000 to $100,000 a year. And you're on a great path to follow my path into this stuff. Some folks are already implementing, and now that's when things get exciting, right? When you're able to save $200,000, $300,000 a year to just grow your net worth over time. But getting back to my story, put that first rental into service. I think the monthly rents were about $2,200 a month, and the mortgage, the PITI, was $1,600 a month. So I had quite a bit of beer money there. The delta between the mortgage and what I was bringing in income. And for a while there, I was just like a dumb kid. I was like, wow, this is cool. And then I started to realize kind of financial dogma that we're all taught. Like when we first went into corporate management training, the Vanguard guy would come in, or the Prudential guy, or all these certified financial planners that are just certified and get licenses to sell us traditional investments. Because this is the starter pack. And this is the way I grew up. Invest in your 401k. You get supposedly tax benefits there. Number 2, buy a house to live in. This is exactly what I did. And then number 3, pay down debt. Now, I talk a lot about differences between normal advice out there for normal people and the other side of the coin, and more for financial advice for folks that save a lot more and have the responsible financial skills to do a little bit different things that I discovered what the wealthy do and that I put into practice and it worked for me. This is where I came up with the whole wealth elevator concept, where there's different floors to the wealth elevator. There's a different paradigm shifts. It's not a one size fits all. There are folks like Dave Ramsey. I actually met the guy. I love his content, but it caters towards the masses. And that's not the folks that come through the wealth elevator doors. Most people coming in are not on the basement level where your net worth is under $250,000. You're just merely trying to get out of debt. And that's where the advice of pay down debt comes from. But most of you folks out there, you fall in this category of taking your funds and investing it and taking out good leverage, good debt to make more money, to buy more assets. And then, of course, there was never a curriculum out there for folks over $1 million, $5 million, and then the penthouse, $10 million plus. So that's what the Wealth Elevator book does. There's like a little pull-out chart in there to help you see which floor you personally are on. I would highly suggest checking out that book on Amazon and get a bird's eye view of all the different floors of the Wealth Elevator to see what's ahead. But again, this is the way I grew up, and this is all I knew. And I think that's where we all get trapped in the world of traditional investments, which ultimately just makes the certified financial planner and the Wall Street companies wealthy. And there's this narrative of go to school, study hard, get a good job. This is where I started to meet a lot of alternative thinkers out there who were very wealthy and implementing these same strategies that we're going to be talking about. There became a very stark contrast between the way that we were all taught to do it and the way the wealthy do it. And what I realized was a lot of the strategies that the wealthy do, it's very easy and implementable by everybody. But boy, is it very contrary to what we're all taught out there. So again, this is that first rental property or home I bought. They're on the bottom right. Again, this is Seattle, Washington. And I did buy at the right time. This is around 2009. So got a great wave, which we know this market cycle now went from 2009 to 2022 to 23. And as I'll talk about ahead, I actually sold this property, I believe in 2016 there. And some people say, you dummy, you could have sold it for like almost double than what you sold it for. You left 400 grand on the table. And I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't have had the thousands of units that I own in the syndication deals. I wouldn't have met the cool people. And obviously, net worth don't lie. Net worth grew a lot more by going into more and more assets. So that's what this whole strategy of re-leveraging your equity again and again. The number one mistake that I see most amateur landlords and investors make is they buy a property or a few and they pay them down. That's great once you hit a certain net worth level. And I would argue and define that as $4 to $5 million in terms of what I call end game. Because at that point, that's enough money for you to survive off a steady rate of 5%. And obviously we have end game strategies such as accredited investor banking, infinite banking, etc. For what we're talking about here is like, how do you grow your net worth in a prudent manner to get to that level in a reasonable amount of time? And the trifecta of strategies that we're going to be getting into is investing in alternative investments, coupled with the tax strategies of the depreciation passive losses you get from those investments, and then accredited investor, infinite banking. So when you tie these three strategies together, what I found is you can get to where you want to be in about a third amount of time. And you got to realize that at this time, like I didn't really care for my job. My motivation and mindset was like, I just need to get out. A lot of us are going to be lucky enough to be that first generation multimillionaire. We always say our kids are going to be spoiled, but I always say that motivation and mindset that they're just not going to have, right? There's a pain point. We all have a pain point. I had a huge pain point, and that was a big motivation for me to save my money. I can remember like my online savings checking account. My paycheck would come in twice a month. I would pay my expenses, pay my credit card bills, and it would just inch up every single month. Every month it would go up 6,000, then go down 2,000, then go up 8,000, then go down 3,000. Steadily, it would be going up. So I know the life energy that it takes to save $20,000, $100,000. A lot of it is just time. And that's how this game is. It's not the get rich quick scheme, but if you can save your money and then also compound it and pay a lot less in taxes, so essentially your net worth is cutting through the resistance through the air, that's how you get there a lot quicker. That was 2009, 2010 when I put that first rental property into service. I bought another duplex a few years later in Seattle. But this is where I learned about rent to value ratios and buying properties in less sexy markets or primary markets where you don't get very much cash flow and it's just too competitive and expensive out there. And I started to discover something called a turnkey rental out in the flyover states. So in 2012, I tried it out, right? That's what I do. I try things out, I get proof of concept, and then if it works, I move in more swiftly and confidently. So in 2012, I bought my first rental out of state. I never saw it, never touched it, just purely remote, had property management remotely. It worked and it was pretty cool. And so what did I do? I sold my 3 units in Seattle, Washington, and I started to redeploy that money. And in 2015, I had 11 single family homes spread across Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, and Pennsylvania. And at that point, I think what differentiates me from most of our investors is I continued to plow money, but I put it into my education. So I would pay for all these. Now I look back and a lot of them were dumb, 10 grand here, 25 grand here to join different mastermind groups. A lot of these groups out there are fake groups out there led by a guru. The information is it's okay, but you meet some cool people, and that's where I would meet a lot of my general partners out there and my lifelong colleagues and friends and just people on the same path financially. And that was the idea behind creating the Family Office Ohana Mastermind, a mastermind of other family offices, which are what you guys are going to blossom into. It was so awesome to climb the ladder together. But I think 60,000, it's probably expanded a lot more since then, but that was key for me. And I also will say I wasn't married at this time. I didn't have kids. So it's not like I had to ask my spouse for permission. I see it all the time. Majority of investors out there, one spouse, likely you, is the person that is more the leader in terms of their family finances. And it always takes just one person to say no and not do something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, but that's required here. So one would say, get your skeptic spouse involved. Easier said than done. I would say 80 to 90% of folks out there, your spouse is just not interested in it. And that's where I get my whole theory about educating the next generation or kids. And if they don't have money, they don't have a job, I think it's a waste of time to teach this to them. And especially when you couple in, they need to have an interest. Like most of the people in our family office group and investor group, they love doing this stuff, right? You guys have these crazy spreadsheets that you guys have made, and you enjoy talking about investing and saving your money, building a nest egg over the years, like virtual gardening in a way. So, like I said, the whole spouse thing, it's going to be a little bit of a hit and miss there. One tip I do have is I think you guys are living in the numbers all the time, your spreadsheet, you have a good understanding, but a lot of this is just communicating to a partner who is maybe doesn't have the interests nor the knowledge base to be able to make a decision hand in hand with you. So if you want to Google this Sankey diagram, there's some cool online tools out there that can help you whip this up pretty quickly in a great visual format. Here on the left side, you have all your income coming in. And on the right side is how it's going out when I was working out in the field as a young construction manager. But I'm just showing you this because this can be a great way to start a conversation with your spouse and your family because it's very visual. Keep trying to keep it as simple as you can. I started to grow my rental property portfolio, adding a rental here. You can see the impact. The cause and effect was that the savings went up. And as the years went by, you slowly add rental properties, my savings started to expand. And at a certain point, it started to become like, wow, this is becoming sizable. And I think if you're somebody who's not super into budgeting and saving your money, it's going to be tougher. But there's becomes a certain point with every investor where you're like, wow, I'm really getting traction because it's very motivating to like, if I just can save up $20,000 to go buy another rental property or another $50,000 to go into a syndication deal, that will equate to X amount in terms of maybe cash flow or certainly going to my bottom line, my net worth. And now you're seeing it move. And my story, as you can see, is not like a get rich quick scheme. It's very prudently like saving money every single month. And of course, I had the advantage of being able to save a phenomenal amount of money. $100,000 every single year for a handful of years there really vaulted me to where I need to be. Another thing that I'll have people pay attention to is like percent of alternative investments. To me, you can't get to where you want to be by having a majority of your funds in traditional investments, the stocks, bonds, mutual funds, the normal sad American diet of investing that we're all taught to do, especially when you are growing your net worth. So in the Wealth Elevator book, there's actually a pull-out chart where there's somewhat of a recommendation in terms of percent alternatives that you need to have. And when you're younger, under $1 million net worth, especially, you need to have a much higher percentage than what I think you need to have. That said, I understand that everybody's on-ramping into this world, and it's not going to be overnight that you're going to get to 50% alternative investments. The quicker you can do it, the quicker you're going to get moving down on this path and climbing this ladder. But when I started to get in this world very quickly, I would say even 5 years, 6 years in, I was extremely heavy, probably a little bit too much, but it worked out for me. I was maybe 80 to 100% of my net worth was in alternative investments, rental properties. But this is where I hit a bit of growing pains. At this time, 2015, like I said, I had 11 of these rental properties. And if you do the math here with $300 of cash flow per property, and of course, that's after all taxes, insurance, maintenance, that's the real way you calculate your profit. Just because your mortgage is $1,600 a month and your rents are $2,200 a month, that delta is not all gravy. You have to pay a lot of money to your property manager and expenses. And especially when crap like this happens, right? I probably had over a dozen evictions. And I would say 1/3 of the time, it ends up in being a catastrophe, anywhere from a $5,000 to a $30,000 repair bill, because some nincompoop out there decides to trash your property on the way out because they feel like you've wronged them as a tenant. I'll leave it at that. Look, I grew up in a home where if I understand if you don't pay, you can't stay. If you can't afford something, you don't buy it. But hey, again, that's not how most of the world works. But if you did the math here with $300 of profit per property, and 11 rental properties, that's just not enough. Most of you folks out there would say, or tell me at least, you need about $10,000 of passive income at least. Therefore, if you just do the math, you're going to need 20 to 40 of these properties to replace your income. And just to give you a little insight what it's like to own 11 rental properties, I used a professional property management that was remote. These guys did all my dirty work for me, and it was relatively hands-off on my part. But with 11 rental properties, I had maybe an eviction or two every year, some of which ended up in this, and at least some type of issue that popped up every quarter. And mind you, this is with 11 rental properties. Now, if you're thinking you're going to need 20 to 40 of these rental properties, now multiply the exception rate by 2 to 3 at least. So now you're talking about an eviction like every other month and some kind of catastrophe that happens every month that, yeah, you don't have to do the work. The property manager is supposed to handle that for you. But again, the role of managing the manager, it just becomes now a second job. Now, that job obviously replaces your income and grows over time. But this is where I learned the lesson where at some point, owning little rental properties just are not scalable. And this is where I was so lucky to be in groups and have the relationships with higher net worth purely passive accredited investors that were going into syndication deals. And for me, it was a very natural transition because I had the peer group that did that. But nobody talks about this stuff, right? Everybody's buy a rental property, you'll be free. That's what the rich dad told you, right? But nobody ever told you about how do you actually implement this into your portfolio. This is what in the Wealth Elevator book that I call the transition between floor one, where you're buying rental properties, just trying to get to accredited investor status, just trying to get your first $500,000 to $1 million net worth, and then stepping up into some of these larger deals where you're just a passive investor. And the cool thing about being a passive investor is there's nothing for you to do. There's no management duties, so no headaches, which allows you to increase your throughput at your business or your day job to increase this. I think a big mistake that I see very hands-on landlords make is they don't realize what is their highest and best use. They think that they're an amateur landlord and they want to push this, but in reality, and I think a lot of folks out there listening that make over $200,000, $300,000 a year, you'll agree that your highest and best use is at your day job or your business. Now, you may or may not like it. What we're advocating here is you don't need to do this forever, right? There comes a finite point in time, whether that's 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, that you titrate off of that lifestyle. And at that point, you become Mr. Passive Man here and you just relax and you turn off the active ordinary income job. We'll talk more about taxes in the future, but you turn your portfolio into passive income. Therefore, you can use the passive losses to totally negate your passive income with or without real estate professional status, rep status. And you turn off the ordinary income where you have to pay a lot more taxes on the ordinary income than the passive income. The other cool thing about these LP positions is no legal liability. You're just a passive investor. And if you're worried about debt in your name, the debt gets put in the general partner's key principal's name, not the passive investor's name. So if you're a little cringy about buying little rental properties or the debt being in your name, you don't have to worry about that. But I think the biggest thing for high net worth investors over $1 million, at that point, you have something to lose and you just don't want a stupid little trip, fall, somebody drowns in the puddle outside on the sidewalk outside your rental property and suing you, right? When you're a passive LP partner, that's the beauty of the LP position, the limited partner, limited liability there. My journey took me a long time to just get my head above water, get to that second floor of the wealth elevator. Again, starting in 2007, graduating with zero net worth. The 11 rentals took me to 2015. So this was not a get rich quick scheme. And I talked to a lot of non-accredited investors, less and less these days, but I'm like, come back to me in 5 to 6 years when you have a $500,000, $1 million net worth. It's just going to take a while. As I've mentioned earlier, this is a bit of a red pill type of viewpoint. With real estate, you make money 4 ways: tenant paying down the mortgage, tax benefits, property appreciation, cash flow. And then this is where it trumps buying a home to live in by yourself. Because when you buy a home to live in, you're the sucker who's paying down the mortgage, where when it's a rental property or investment property, the tenant's paying down your mortgage for you. Plus, you're getting a lot more tax benefits because you're able to take the passive losses from the depreciation of the asset, which you can't do when you're the homeowner. People talk a lot about the homeowners. You can take the interest deduction, that's measly. That's nothing. And why would you want to take 20-cent deduction on a dollar expense? That's silly. But again, that's more of the BS type of financial advice that's put out there that real estate agents and lending brokers, they all just use to get you to transact more. And this is where, at least speaking for myself, and I think you'll start to see this develop in your peer groups as you start to move in the future, that there's a bit of a red pill type of mentality out there where, why is the government having us invest this way? And I'll say, if everybody did what I'm saying here and increase their alternative investments to get more passive losses, to follow what the tax code is incentivize you to do, you'll pay a lot less taxes and you'll be financially free in a third amount of time. How would you power our country like that, where everybody's just like getting financially free and just kicking back? Obviously, I don't think a lot of you guys will do that, right? You guys will find more fun endeavors that betters the world. But right now, how things are set up, everything's channeled to go to Wall Street investments through 401ks, mutual funds, and other retail type of investments so that the wealthy, the big institutions get rich. Look around like at your corner bank to Wall Street in New York. How else do they afford all these big salaries and buildings? They're not doing it for free. And this was like, to me, the aha moment. My parents were very hardworking. They had doctorates and master's degrees. They did everything that they were supposed to do, but it took them forever to get to financial freedom. I don't think they ever got there because they were led by all this dogma of doing all this traditional stuff. I found the system that a lot of people were doing very quietly. As they say, the wealth whispers. It's not very flashy. It's not flip this house, wholesale this house, invest, create an e-commerce business, right? No, that's a lot of it is just noise that's done by younger people that don't have very much money. But what do you do when you have some cash and you want to do this a little bit slower? That's the path that I've outlined in the book, The Wealth Elevator. And what I've realized is people who invest in Wall Street, again, those are the traditional investments. The people that I was surrounding myself with, people investing in real assets or property off of Wall Street. So this difference between investing in Main Street versus Wall Street was very evident. And before all, this was the linear path that I think I was on and we're all on to start out. Study hard, become a W-2 professional or start your business. Be frugal, don't go into debt. How else will you grow your asset category by doing that? Keep working hard. 20, 30, 40 years go by. You buy a house, you have a family, and then you retire. Who knows? People are living longer and they keep pushing that retirement age up. Most people have a horror story of a coworker or somebody in their family who retired and they just passed away. And that's a tragedy, but that is actuary tables. That's just how the numbers work. Here are some of the actual quotes that some of our investors have said in the past. I can't believe I can hit these types of return per year on their investments. I thought we were stuck in this 8 to 10% realm, which I would argue is, maybe a little bit over than what it actually is when you really take out the hidden fees in some of these accounts. I didn't realize that my money can be doing 2 to 3 times better than in just a simple rental property, and not even including a value add real estate syndication or private equity deal where you can do even better there. And that's where I was like, I asked the question very early in 2010. I was like, I'm making like 20, 30% returns on my money with this silly rental property that I wasn't the best investor at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. Why is it that I'm only going to make like 6 to 8% in my 401k, right? There's a huge difference there. And then where's that money going to? Who stole it? That's the institutional investment world taking it. And that's where I discovered, and I got a little bit of sour taste in my mouth, that that's ultimately the big institutions are taking majority of the returns while we take on all the risks. So now you all know this is that Wizard of Oz effect, that the man is behind the curtain pulling the strings. And as they say, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. You can go back to the way you used to do things and continue doing it, or you can step into this world of alternative investments with a lot of other quiet multimillionaires doing it this way too. Here's a fun little chart that I made a long time ago. This blue one is, as you continue to work and improve your craft, your money making ability goes up over the years in the blue. We're on the hedonic treadmill. The amount of money you spend also goes up. I would also say it greatly goes up when your kids are around. When your kids get a little older, it dips down. I have another chart later on that we'll talk about, discussing more on that. This purple one is your investments. As you start to build your portfolio, returns go up exponentially because the world of compound interest. As you start to grow your portfolio, you start to redeploy it, get more assets, that starts to really grow on you. But I'll overlay a couple other fun ones here. The green one is constantly increasing expectations at work, right? If not merely just a 2 to 3% escalator just to account for inflation. They always want more for you at work. Yeah, you will always want to be constantly improving, but it gets tiring. And that's what creates this heavy decreasing motivation over time. And I'll tell you, at least speaking from my story, 5 to 7 years into my career, I became a pretty bad employee. Why? Because the income that I was bringing in from my rental properties probably put me at a higher point than my boss and my boss's boss. And it really ticked me off because we'd do our budgeting for the projects and they made a stupid comment to me one time that I remember. And I always take these things and I use it as motivation for myself. They said, "Hey, Lane, you're just a junior engineer. You don't know the finances like how we do." And I was like, that's bold because, yeah, you might know this a little bit better than I do, but I certainly know personal finances a hell of a lot better than you are. And also, I make more money at the end of the day with all my rental properties and my investments. So that was where my motivation went down. And this is where you look for things that in your life that if you look back, things happen for a reason. Things pop up, especially when you go through times of tribulation and struggle, and there's pain and there's resistance there. In a way, maybe the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, was pushing me out of that W-2 working world. And maybe this was the grandmaster plan, was to get the heck out and then also help other people out of that type of existence, to reverse engineer and flip the script on that linear path where you put your money into good investments, you use good debt, you continue to work hard, you are on this fast path to becoming an accredited investor and beyond. And then if you want to have a family, you can have that too. You can have your cake and eat it too, which is the cool part. For most of our investors, I think that they find this stuff once they have about $1.5 million net worth. Therefore, that I think that's why majority of our clients are in their 40s or early 50s, because you realize, wow, I got $1.5 million net worth. My income is high. My kids are older. I think that's a big part of it. Once the kids get about 9, 10 years old, you tend to have a little bit more free time on your hand, where we don't have very many investors with young kids ages 0 to 10, because you're just trying to keep your head above water and you don't want to try to do different things. But ideally, you want to get into this stuff in your younger age. That's like personally myself. Now I've set myself up so if I wanted to, I could just enjoy the young kids when they're 5 years old. That seems to be the sweet spot, and have my money working for me passively. Obviously, I'm by no means passive, but that's my goal for you guys, is to have your money investing and the tax situation, and especially get the life insurance all set up with the accredited investor banking, and have that be on fast pass autopilot mode. That way you can have the confidence that you're on the rails, you're on the trajectory 3, 4 times faster than your average buddy doing it the traditional way. Now, for some of us in our 40s, it's too late to do that, right? It is what it is. And the cool part is that there's still time to catch up. But again, this is the whole premise behind the Family Office Ohana Mastermind and teaching this to our kids. Man, if they could be in their 20s and start to put money away, 30 grand a year, buying a rental property, then putting it into syndication deals, they can set themselves up so quickly and just kick back and relax. And especially when mom and dad give them several $1 million head start, man, now you're starting to build a legacy, right? Most people, I think, out there that are wealthy, they might have $3 to $7 million net worth. It's not enough for that to roll over the generations, because especially when you start to bring in the next generation, traditionally, they're not trained with these types of wealth values and network and knowledge. That's why they say 90% of wealth leaves a family in 2 to 3 generations, because they just mess it up. That's why it's so important to bring them involved on this journey after you learn it, of course. But I think that's where the peer group comes in. But the goal here for everybody, and if you're $2 million net worth in your 40s and 50s, you play your cards right, you're probably going to get to 8 figures. At that point, if you are somewhat adept at getting the next generation involved, they can take it the rest of the way and really build that dynasty trust and that dynasty generational wealth. It all starts with, what's the plan? We'll invest in alternative investments. We have the syndication masterclass for passive investors, really to dial in on that. There are a lot of tax strategies. I always say learn this stuff to some extent and then go find a CPA, not the opposite way around. Too many investors, I think, they just rely on a CPA. And most times the CPAs just do it the easy, non-aggressive, conservative way. The third part of this trifecta is the infinite banking, where you incorporate specially configured life insurance. And then this trifecta, what I again discovered is it gets you to where you want to be in about a third amount of the time. But what I also discovered is all these strategies, they're very implementable by anybody. You don't need to have any special skills. You don't need to know anything special, but you do have to know the right people. And a little bit of it is in the dosage and the timing. What I discovered by meeting a lot of other high net worth people is that they were all implementing this trifecta. And that's what we've come to help educate people into implementing for themselves. So we want to get people from the old school thinking, retire with $1 million of assets, which is definitely not enough. You need more like $2 to $3 million at the bare minimum these days to be able to coax in your old age. And then get people out of this being house rich, all your money in your house, pay down your mortgage, and cash poor, because that's not a good lifestyle. Typical client out there, most of our folks live in California. I think it's a big state, but it's also high incomes out there. A lot of you guys make multiple six figures, a couple of kids. That's why we're a big family organization. You might have some type of technical degree. Certainly you went to college, this decade plus working at your profession. You're certainly not the grunt level anymore. You're probably more on the director level, if not higher. Through that, you pay a lot of ordinary income. And that's really where the tax strategies come in. So especially if you make over $400,000, $300,000 a year, that going back to the trifecta, the taxes is going to be your big low-hanging fruit here. But unfortunately, unless you get involved in some deals, you're not going to get the passive losses to implement that. Infinite banking is, I think, something especially the engineers out there will geek out on. But we have the infinite banking e-course for everybody to consume in the members portal. But I would urge people focus on the big things first. I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule, the Pareto's law, where you focus on the big movers first. And most times it's either investing in alternatives or tax strategies. And then the infinite banking is typically last. A lot of you folks were raised in a house where debt was bad and being cash is king, as they say. And this is the baby steps of Dave Ramsey that he talks about that I redlined a little bit. But again, Dave Ramsey, he caters towards the masses, right? The masses are in credit card debt. They don't make very much income, typically less than $50,000 to $100,000 a year. That's fine. I don't discriminate to anybody, right? But there's so much information out there. Just a lot of those folks just need to keep a budget, right? Don't spend more than they make. Whereas there wasn't very much curriculum for higher paid professionals, people above $1 million net worth. So that's what I sought to do when I wrote the book, The Wealth Elevator. But this is typically what I think a lot of us were the path that we followed, the traditional path. We do events. This is a kind of a quick screenshot of the last event that we did. Most of the people, I would say 100% these days, are accredited investors, most of which qualify through net worth. I would say like those would be like the dentists or the business owners or the doctors would probably fall in that category. And for those guys, man, the world's your oyster if you can implement this type of stuff. I've had onboarding calls with thousands of people these days, and we always make you guys fill out that form of what's your AGI, what's your income, what your net worth is. And nothing surprises me these days. And I can usually tell who's the trust fund kids out there. But as far as most people come through the door is first generation multimillionaires. But one thing I would say, and this is just the data just shows this, is take high income earners like doctors. They make phenomenal salaries, at least a few $100,000 a year, some as high as $1 million per year. Take those people coming in, the people implementing this trifecta of strategies, their net worths are all 4 mil, 5 mil, 6 mil and above. On the other hand, the people with phenomenal salaries, you would think are killing it. But again, net worth does not lie. Their net worths are all measly $1 to a few $1 million. So it's night and day difference. And we try not to have this type of attitude, right? But I think it starts to develop over the years. Like, we don't want to be elitists out here, but there are people out there that, to use the Harry Potter reference, the non-believers, the people who do it the conventional ways, are the mugglers. This is what's so cool when you start to meet other people also on the same path. And that was why I created the FOOM, and we have the Wealth Elevator investor community, because when you look at my path, I did this all by myself from 2009 to 2015. I thought I was smart. I consume all the books, the podcasts, and we didn't have YouTube back then as much as today. I was able to piece this puzzle together, and I just put my head down and saved money and bought rental properties, rinse, wash, repeat, bought 11 of them. And at that point, by chance, I started to spend money and get into higher level groups and just found myself in different circles. Part of my secret to this too is I had the podcast at that time, and people wanted to court me, and I became a bigger player in the space. So that really opened up a lot of doors for myself. The podcast was huge for me. That was really the one lucky thing I did that set the trajectory for myself and our community to be that beacon to attract other high quality people to our organization. But up until that point, 2015, I just did it all by myself. For people who know me personally, I'm an introvert. I'm pretty reserved, but you get me talking about money and investing. I really get jazzed on it a lot. To me, it's super fun. So I somewhat kind of turn into a different person, which I think a lot of you guys, when you guys talk about stuff you like, you guys do the same thing. But I went to this, I can remember the first event where I met several accredited investor, and I started to see a lot of this more modern day curriculum that you see from the Wealth Elevator today. And I was like, whoa, that was a lot of fun. I didn't realize there are other people out there doing this stuff too. Because prior to that, I would just go to lunch with my buddies and they would say, oh, that's crazy, man, buying rental properties in Birmingham. But yeah, maybe I'll do that one day. Excuse 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it was like, man, pulling teeth like this. But then I started to meet people that were on the same trajectory with me. And instead of trying to preach to them and wasting my time and energy, like, it was so synergetic. Like, we were trading referrals, we were sharing very personal things. Like, a lot of this money is very personal, and just like the learning and the experience just exponentially grew, and it was so much fun. And that's what I wanted to create for a lot of you folks out there, is that community, that safe space, and the opportunity to meet like-minded individuals that are on the same path as you are now. And that was why we created the Family Office Ohana Mastermind. But unless you have that experience, aha moment, that are other people out there like me, I don't think you think that any of these strategies are real, or that there's other people that are like-minded to yourself. That at the end of the day, especially for accredited investors, it's more about the experiences and the social relationships at the end of the day. And that's what's hard to communicate to folks, because right now I think a lot of people are just really in it to grow their net worth a little bit so they can get their skeptic spouse on their side. But trust me, social relationships are the currency of the wealthy, and time. If you can get to where you want to be in a quicker amount of time, is really the ultimate asset at the end of the day. And somewhat, you have to pay money to expedite and decrease learning cycles. But again, I want you guys to have that aha moment. Come out to an event, try us out with your test drive. Obviously, a lot of these events, we try to keep it real nice and high quality, and we vet everybody coming. So you got to pay. It's not free. Nothing's free. If you think it's free, we're not the group for you. But try it out once. See if you want to be a part of our community. Get the vibe. Test the culture out. Talk to other people, and see if this world is for you. And it may not be a good fit that you join the mastermind. But if you're somebody who is going to be investing at least $250,000 in your first year or two, I think joining the Family Office Ohana Mastermind is absolutely required. Now, I'm not going to get into that. You guys can go to thewealthelevator.com/FOOM to learn more about that exclusive group. Putting that out there for those people who don't want to mess around. Right? There's a lot of money here at stake, especially when you're thinking $50,000, $100,000 into just one deal, and you've got to deploy in ideally into dozens of these things. I think joining that FOOM group is somewhat of an insurance, and I think that's just a prudent way to move forward than to just blindly invest in a few deals out here. And plus, even if you invest in a few deals, that's not going to get to you where you want to be. Like, we're not investing in venture capital businesses where you can 5, 20x your money. We're investing in a little bit more like blue collar, boring deals where, yeah, the returns are projected to be higher than traditional investments. But this is not the get rich quick scheme. A little bit of the mentality and the strategy before somebody joining Foom, what they would be doing, and then a little bit insight into what they were working on after, right? Sort of night and day. And if these things don't make sense to you, that's exactly how this world works. A lot of it is you don't know what you don't know, right? You got to get past that first, second stage of learning. And then the people that are in Foom, they're skiing downhill with each other, holding hands, going faster and faster. And I think that's what I see is like people, they take a little bit of this wealth elevator content, they read the book, they watch some of the YouTube videos, and they start implementing it. But they're just hitting that tip of the iceberg. And this is just to get an insight. And we do hot seats within that group from time to time. And investors, they put everything out there on display. And everything in that group is confidential. But this is to give you insight what like a portfolio would look like for one of those Foam members. And at one time, and this is where, as you guys always hear from like the podcast and the disclaimers, a lot of what I'm talking about is infotainment. It's meant to be, it's a work in progress. This is as much as a changing world. I just did a good example. At one time, I thought I was going to buy 40 to 50 turnkey rentals, and that was going to be my retirement. Obviously, that's not the program that I'm thinking today. And at one time, this is back in 2018, I thought that this was the framework. This is it, right? Buy some rentals and you get the syndications on top of it, and you build from there, and you create this syndication ladder, like a CD ladder. And then it definitely changed from there as private funds came into place, a little bit less moving parts. And, what we want to get people to, and this is an exercise that we do in our workshops and in person, is we start to build the deployment plan, what you want to do. And if, you want to take a screenshot of this and build this on your own, you start to outline the years ahead, right? Because this is a multi-year plan. And where's the sources of funds to invest, to go from traditional to alternative investments? So it's typically going to come from your heart, sweat, and tears, which is your annual net savings, the difference between what you make and what you spend. Again, most of you guys are able to save $100,000 at least per year. And then some of you guys who are new to the organization may have a lot of cash liquid savings. So obviously we want to deploy that first because it's not doing anything. And if you get a sense of, as we go 1, 2, 3, 3A, 3B, essentially what's going on there is that we try and deploy the laziest money first, the money that's not getting any ROI or ROE, return on equity, and then start to go down, right? Whereas the money in our QRPs, ideally, you would think your money would be in the stock market. It's doing something. It may not be where you want it to be, but it's doing something. So let's get the lazy debt equity in our home equity first, deploy that out. But of course, you have to take into account taxes, and this where on your guys' onboarding call, we can talk about maybe some specifics. And then I think the taxes is like that second overlay on top of that, because some of you guys are already in the highest tax bracket. To take money out of your qualified retirement plan, you're going to be paying a lot of taxes in that. And it may be worth it. It may very well be worth it. And especially for some folks that did it the traditional way where you maxed out your 401k, majority of your net worth will be in these QRP accounts, which is exactly where you don't want it to be to implement these types of strategies. Also, how do you fatten up your infinite banking, accredited investor banking for the long term? And how do you flow your money through that to investments? Some people want to build their net worth through more of a cash flow focus here on the left side, some more of an equity growth focus here on the right side with more developments, more private equity. No one way of doing it, right? Taking the equity growth path versus the cash flow path. But ideally, again, let's not look at myopically with just one or a few investments. You have to deploy into ideally dozens and dozens of deals out there to get that diversification. You never want to invest more than 5 to 10% of your net worth into any one project. Now, for some of the folks that are above $5 to $10 million net worth, investing in the Foom membership is, I think, a no-brainer at that point. If anything, your peer network just gets improved from there. But there you'll find people who have crested that growth years period in their life, and are moving more towards living with less risk and just pure cash flow at that point. So there's different theories that we have within that little boom higher echelon of folks. So what does the end game portfolio look like? But if your net worth is under $5 million, don't even look at the slide yet. Just focus on building your asset category. What we hope to provide folks, especially in the FOOM, is, and even if you're just an investor with us in our community, is ultimately we're trading some sets of problems for other first world problems. So these are some of the examples that come from it. But I think this all comes down to the numerical indicators. A lot of folks are anywhere from 40 to 60% alternative investments, rental property, syndications, private equity, not majority of that traditional investments. And then the majority of their income is the passive income color of money, as opposed to ordinary portfolio income where you get taxed at a higher rate there. This is, again, just taking a slide from one of those FOOM hot seats. I'm big on action. There's that Rich Dad, Poor Dad book out there that I think it's a great book, very much on mindset. But if you get a sense of my vibe, I'm very much more action plan as opposed to warm and fuzzy mindset. So I'm big on what is the 80-20 that we're doing here? What is the Pareto's law? What's the one thing that's going to move it forward, that's going to get us leverage in getting us further on the path? What strategies can we implement there? But that is end of the introduction section. As you can see, I'm extremely passionate about these sets of strategies, the trifecta, as I call it. It's changed my life tremendously. I know it's not an overnight thing. It takes a lot of patience, but I think if you change your mindset and understand the reasons why we do these types of things, it definitely can get a lot of the same benefits out of it. And you get your money out of the way and you get to financial freedom. You start to realize what is the real point of life, which to me is the social relationships with people that are like-minded on the same trajectory, and then trading your money in for experiences. A lot of people, the whole mindset of paying down your house, being house rich, cash poor, not the life that I want to live. I want to trade my money in for experiences, because to me, at the end of the day, that's the point system. So to do that, you need money. And so what I'm trying to do here for folks is invest in alternative assets to get better returns, to get also the passive losses, to pay a lot less in taxes, flow all of this through the infinite banking, accredited investor banking system. And then you can create this lifestyle, what you want. And at the end of the day, we are looking for this freedom, the freedom to do what we want with whom we want on our terms. And then what my hope too is, once you guys learn all this stuff, you pay it forward, send the proverbial wealth elevator back down for others. And that's why we have the community and we have the events. So you guys, you come in, you're a little bit of a sponge, and we have the culture where people help new people out. But the idea is hopefully you like our organization, you like our community, and you pay it forward for other people also on the same path as you. And my hope is, obviously, I found my passion project in running this organization, helping new people step into this world of alternative investments, whether you're new to real estate deals or you've owned a lot of rental properties like me and you want to get out of being a landlord. It's moving into this world no different than a college professor or a preschool teacher. I see that as my purpose in the world these days. But you may want to use your freedom to do something else that is good for the world. And I think that's what this is all about. But with that, we'll see you guys in the next module.
Okay, so this is the last slide. This kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. If you're relatively younger, in your 30s and 40s, and you're already at that $3 million threshold, the irrevocable trust, get that thing tomorrow. If you're older and you've crested past that $5 million net worth, then get that too. I'm just throwing that out there, not giving any legal advice. But part of that has to do with this concept of core capital here. So I'll explain this. Core capital this is age on this axis. As you start to get older, you need less money, right? A lot of us here have younger kids. You guys are in this stage where you probably need $4, $5, $6 million net worth to be able to put it in cruise control and not do anything. But as you get older, especially as kids leave, they're not a nuisance anymore. You can take them off the books. probably only need maybe $2 or $3 million or even less, right? So that's this concept right here. So the idea is that's all you need. This dark blue corresponds to this dark blue, which is lifestyle spending. So lifestyle spending is like your basic needs. And it's said in different ways to mean the same thing, right? This is how much money we need to survive and some beer money on the side. But at some point, we don't need it, and it becomes more of this gray money right here, right? This is the legacy money. I think I might differ. I'm sure I'll change my mind, but I'm like, I only got one daughter, and I'm like, even if I had 2 kids, I'd be like, hey, give them 1.5, 2 mil each. Any more, you're just gonna mess them up, right? I went to private school, I know what's up. So I would probably call this light gray, but I think half of you guys might call this dark core capital, right? It's needed. But at least we're talking about these concepts, right, in this way. So the idea is lock down your lifestyle spending first, your core capital first. And that's probably, again, let's just call it what it is, maybe 3 to 5 mil net worth. Once you have that, lock it up, and everything else, all the gray stuff that should go to this, gets put in your irrevocable and put up in the cloud and gone away out of your estate. But you're not going to do that investing in like traditional investments or not being your own business owner, right? Some of you guys own businesses. You have the ability to get there. But if you're just working for the man making $300,000 a year or less, ain't going to happen. You need to take more risk. But for most of people in our community, that's not the need. We don't need private jets. That's one blueprint I'm showing here. But what's nice, once you have your core capital set, everything else is off the table of litigators too when you're doing this. That's what's so nice. It's like so freeing in a way that you're set, you're in cruise control, that whole concept. I changed the terms a little bit to align, but it solves the question of like, all right, yeah, how much do you need and what's the concept? And then it's also the concept of what's the real goal. If people who have read the book, the Bill Perkins book, Die with Zero? Yeah, that's a recommended book. It starts to talk about this idea of maximizing your experiences. So this is esoteric. So you have like money, right? We're all trying to get money, right? Money is very important when you don't have it. I think a lot of us, time is more valuable than money. In a strange way, you can change like money for time. Like I pay for the Whole Foods delivery thing. Whenever I got $40 worth of groceries, I have them deliver. I don't waste my time going to the grocery store, especially when you have young kids. I just pay. I don't care. Just pay. I'm paying for time. But there becomes a point where when you're older, you're sicker, and then you bring in health, right? You can't use money to pay for time at that point. But what is in the book, Die with Zero, the whole point is it's not necessarily time, because you can have a lot of time and you can live an uneventful life, or experiences that is the thing. And this is where I argue you need freaking money to exchange for experiences. And at the end of the day, experiences to me is the point system. Now you might disagree with me, but experiences is what I think is the score at the end of the day. Throughout this, we're all here playing this game, trying to get passive cash flow, but the real game is exchanging your money for experiences while you're optimizing your finances. That's the optimization question. Maximize experiences to optimize financing. We all know that you're getting older and you could die at any moment, which is why you need a trust, and your core capital goes less and less. So it makes sense to like, all right, when I get older, I just need to trade these suckers in, this money in, for experiences. This is in super fine print here. Most of you are trying to go, and this is myself too, are trying to go for 99% confidence that you will have enough to last and understand the trade-off for limited time to achieve that. What that means is we're scarcity minded. We're like squirrels putting nuts away in the tree, and we're just running around. We have a shit ton of nuts in the tree, more than enough for a winter in Hawaii. And this is like the case for the people in FUM, right? I think more times than not, they're still like working their asses off, even though their net worth is 3 to 7 million net worth. And just makes absolutely no sense. But that's the case. You know, it makes sense, right? Because if you spent your whole life trying to save money, make money, you start to associate your sense of value on that. So that makes sense to me. But if you look at it like this diagram, it's stupid. But with that, thank you all for coming.
Going through this whole transition myself, it was really hard to do it without meeting other purely passive accredited investors out there.
So that's why we've created the network, which you guys can join.